All right, welcome back to Blue by 90. I'm Justin, joined by Tanner today. And is Michigan back? Are we back just like that?
I
I don't
want to
know.
bring this up. I threw this in the group chat, but I saw Annie Agar, who I'm not a fan of personally, but she tweeted something about can't wait to see all the Michigan fans say we're back. We're back from what, Annie? Back from our first loss in the regular season in 3 years. Back from our first loss after going 15-0, winning the national championship. Not sure what we're coming back from as
I
Michigan
agree.
fans.
I agree.
You
But
lose
we
to the
are
number one
back.
team you lose to the number one team in the country. Is what it is. But you go out and you beat number 11 in a game where you can't throw the ball. Defense has some issues later in the game, but Will Johnson kind of bails us out with the pick six. Kalel Mullings needs to get 30 carries a game. He might lead the country in rushing if he gets that. Like,
Oh my God.
some positives that I took away that we've been pretty negative the last couple of weeks. Refreshing to see.
It absolutely is. I think our last podcast that we did, we were pretty negative, right? Trying to, just figure out what the heck this team was. Honestly, my biggest takeaway from Saturday, and we'll obviously dive into a lot of breaking down what happened exactly, but my biggest takeaway was that felt like a 2023 Michigan game in the fact that they had swagger. They felt like they were like, all right, we're better. We're a really good football team. And we're Michigan. And you're not gonna stop us no matter what is going on. Like, we're gonna find a way to get it done. Right. Like, they had their grit back. They had things go wrong. And you can't, it reminded me of the Penn State game a little bit last year where it's just like, okay, this is not gonna be pretty. And our pass game is not working, but we'll just figure it out. And we're going to be bigger, faster, stronger than you. We want it more than you. And that's what I saw on Saturday, which that gives me more excitement and confidence than anything else that I saw, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, just you got to lean on your best players, right? Like, you got to find ways to win. We know it's not going to come with throwing the ball, right? Like, I think there are certain things that you can do for Orgy in this offense to make it a little easier. Because look, downfield passing wasn't great, but drag routes.
That's putting it nicely.
Drag routes, though, those 5-yard throws. I mean, hey, you hit Marlon Klein. I saw my brother, my long lost brother, Meta Wooten Peace. Shout out to Justin. But he posted that video of him hitting Marlon Klein. He's like, this is a great throw. And I know he's been a little sarcastic, but honestly, you can run. Again, I want mesh. And there were some things, and we haven't seen it with Orgy, but Samaj Morgan, like, he can be a receiver. He absolutely cooked that slot corner on that post. Like, and he's jumping up and down, like, wide open, waiting for the ball. And it's like, no, there's some positives with this team. And if you can get Orgy to be, I don't know what he's going to look like, right? Like, trying to throw the ball. But there's a way that this offense can be really successful beyond just running for 290 yards against USC, right? Like, you can have Orgy throw for 150 yards, potentially. Maybe. I don't know. I might be talking out the side of my neck here on that.
Okay, we'll get into Orgy in a second, but I want to just take a step back a second and say, I think it was really encouraging to me with this offensive line that has struggled in the first 3 weeks, right? We looked at this offensive line and said, hey, you replaced 6 guys on this offensive line. And let's be honest with ourselves. And through week 3, we didn't think any of the guys that were replacing those guys from last year were going to be NFL prospects or were looking like they could, foot the bill, right? But those guys stepped up when we needed them to this week. And all of a sudden they looked like a 2023 offensive line. They looked like a Big Ten championship style offensive line who, even though everybody in the world knew we were going to run the ball, you still figure it out. And it wasn't pretty at all times either, right? They made their fair share of mistakes too, but the combination of Kalel Mullings and Donovan Edwards with the offensive line, I felt like they hit a stride and took a pretty big leap where, yes, you still have to figure out how to throw the football. But that just gives me a lot of encouragement because I think everything else on the offensive side of the ball, it starts with that. Everything else will come after that, and you're still going to have to figure out how to throw it for sure. You got to figure out a lot of things, but before that, you needed to figure out the O line, and I was very encouraged at what I saw on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we've talked about the right tackle position, I thought, issues in pass pro again. So if you get that figured out, but in the run game,
yeah,
I mean, he's athletic, he can move, he gets to a spot when he pulls. I thought Evan Link had his best game. Definitely some issues. I may have put a tweet out that I deleted later because I'm soft, and it was maybe unfair. But I thought offensively, the offensive line, the tight ends, Bredesen, and the backs were phenomenal.
And you're without Colston Loveland.
Absolutely. Right? I was going to bring that up too. That's your best player.
People kind of, I mean, obviously, I think everyone knows what Colston Loveland is to this offense, but everyone kind of brushed over that because of how it worked. But like, you're throwing Alex Orji in there in his first start, who obviously, is not going to be a pass first guy, and you don't have your top target, right? So like, I think you forget about that a little bit. And obviously, the receivers, I thought, it was just hard for Alex. He did not have an open guy very often, even when we did try to throw the ball, right? And so, I think that if Colston Loveland comes back, it changes a lot of things with this offense because he is our best blocking tight end, right? I did think Marlon Klein had a great game and came in and blocked well. Hogan Hansen comes in. Max Bredesen, God bless you. God bless you. I mean, he texted me back this morning and said he's never been more sore after a game than he was on Sunday after that game. But
worth it.
Worth it. 100%. He said it was worth it. He'd do it again in a heartbeat. He'll probably do it again this week. But, and then obviously like Kalel Mullings, just Greg Jennings put the team on your back though. Like, holy shit. You cannot say enough about Kalel Mullings.
That last long run on that touchdown drive to win the game, I mean, that whole drive was all Kalel Mullings. But I'm watching that, and I'm like, oh man, like I'm watching, like, oh, if he might have had some room, but they kind of played it well from the second level. And then he's just dragging, like they're like on his thighs. He's just dragging these dudes, spins around and runs for another 40 yards.
Dude, we were in the stadium obviously for the game, but then we watched it back yesterday, and I had to stop and rewind it, and we were like marking off where the guy started to tackle him, and he literally dragged the guy. You could see rubber pellets flying as the guy
his cleats are dragging through the turf. Yeah.
And it was a legit 10 yards. Like, it was unbelievable. I've never seen, and for a 220-pound back who has already carried the ball how many times, right, throughout a day, to have the strength to spin, move, and drag a guy in that moment for 10 yards and then burst for 60 is like, I mean, I don't know how that's physically possible. I really don't.
Again, he should get at minimum 20 carries a game, ideally 25 to 30. And I don't want to be switching to the negative point of view now, but and Donovan had a nice game, right? He had the touchdown. I thought he runs, I think the last couple of weeks he's been really good at finding the hole and taking what's there. He has the fumble. It's just honestly a great play by the DB. Like, he's held up and he literally punches the football
in the exact right spot. So like, right, that one, I mean, there is, like, to me, there's one thing you can't do in that moment, right?
Absolutely.
Like, we would have been better off with taking 3 sacks in a row and then punting from the end zone rather than fumbling the ball there. Right. And so you have to, like, I'm all for him fighting for extra yards, and it actually was a great run on first down, but like, you also have to kind of know the situation and like just go down, or at least cover the ball up as hard as you can.
Are you talking about Kenny Grant or Donovan Edwards now? Because I'm confused.
That too. It's like, oh my God.
Such a great play. And it's like, you get excited seeing Big 78 run because you know he's quick, but it's like, yeah, don't go for the stiff arm with the ball like a loaf of bread. But I digress. I'm talking about the
I
offense.
mean, yeah, that is like the most ridiculous thing of all time.
It's like
But
maybe the funniest thing. The fact that
if
Michigan won
I
makes it very
thank
funny.
God,
If Michigan
yes,
lost, it's rough. It's not great.
yeah, I definitely agree with that. But I guess you know, I was okay. I think Kirk Campbell as Michigan's offensive coordinator, um, he probably has some improvements still to make. But what I did like was I thought that our run game with Alex Orji in there changed up a lot. I thought that, Orgy opens up the run game. You
Absolutely.
still have to figure out the passing game, but when you have to account for Alex Orgy and he takes a linebacker with him almost every single time, then that I thought I was really impressed with the creativity in the run game. Now we can come up with some maybe creativity or try to get some things going in the pass game too, but I was pretty pumped to see just like from what I thought was very vanilla play calling in weeks 1 through 3 in the run game. I thought that they hit their stride in a play calling scheme wise, in the run game as well.
Yeah, I mean, that first half was fantastic. That first touchdown, one of the USC defenders is really concerned with Alex Orgy, and so that just split second gives Kalel the ability to get going and get to the end zone. And I think you saw that quite a bit with Orgy's threat in the run game. But what you saw in the second half was safeties within 10 yards at all times. And so, even if they're not complete, like you got to take some shots, right? Like we were
You
talking about
have
this
to make them
pre-show.
back up.
Absolutely. We're talking about this pre-show. Samaj, the third down before the touchdown drive, Samaj absolutely cooks his man. I think he falls down. He looks like it looked like Roman
It
Wilson's
was
defender against Ohio State on CJ's
yes,
touchdown where
yes.
he's wide open. Um, you got to take those shots, right? You got to be able to see that.
Well, and I think that on that one, honestly, I think that our offensive line didn't hold up for even like the 2 seconds, which
Yeah,
is
that's
another issue.
probably yeah.
I don't think Orgy even had a shot, but like that all of these things need to happen to your point. Like
Yes.
the O-line needs to be able to hold him for literally 2 seconds as Samaj is cooking him. And then yeah, you got to be able to take a shot there. And that one, like, I mean, anybody can make that throw, right? Like you don't even have to hit him in
Right.
stride.
Because he
You're
can
just
just
like,
go
yeah,
wherever the ball is. It's not like he's got a defender on him, right? So
exactly.
just throw it short and he'll catch it and run.
And run. And then I
But
think to your point too, like drag routes, anything. Like I thought that Michigan could have done a lot more of like you don't have to. It doesn't even have to be a 15-yard route, but like let's get Marlon going over the whether it's Marlon or Hogan Hansen or whoever, like Samaj, Tyler Morris, Fred Moore, like let's get some people going and get Orgy some rhythm in that where it's like, hey, I don't care if it's almost like a dump off type of thing. You have to get him comfortable to at least connect with his receivers.
no, absolutely. And I just want to throw this back to the off season. I may have fallen in this trap myself, Justin, but I remember there was a lot of us that were like, what if he's just like Jalen Milroe? And then I watched Jalen Milroe just drop it in the bucket. And it's like, if he was Jalen Milroe, we'd be cooking with some grease here. No, I mean, I thought for his first start, look, we know the stats. What was it, 7 to 12, 32 yards. He had Marlon Klein on a route that he missed him by a couple of yards. I mean, if he puts that where it needs to be, that may be a catch and run for the big fella. But overall, look, it was like you said earlier, man, it was absolutely the furthest thing from pretty. But I simply do not care. Did you win? Yes.
You won.
Awesome. Don't care. I enjoy running for 290 yards on USC because that was very poetic. Like, kind of just talk about the narrative surrounding the game real quick. USC, for the past couple of years, since knowing they were joining the Big Ten, is like, can they hold up against Michigan and the teams that run the ball? And the answer is no, as of right now. They're going to have to get a lot bigger, stronger in that the front seven in this conference. But it's kind of poetic, man. Like, look, again, it wasn't pretty. 32 passing yards, and I loved it. Right? Like, I was frustrated. I didn't think there was any chance in hell that they were going to put together a drive at the end. Thank God for Kalel Mullings.
Thank God for Kalel Mullings. I also like until that run. Let's talk about that for a second. Like, can I just ask, what are we doing? Because until he breaks a 60-yard run in the most improbable fashion possible, like it's a 2-minute drill. We're huddling up like it's the first drive of the game. Like everybody knows that we're running the ball because we haven't thrown it in forever. And we're like, I'm okay with running the ball creatively there because, we're averaging 6 yards a pop in the run game. But why are we not just get up to the line and go? Right? Like,
yeah,
we're taking 30 seconds off the clock every play. And like, I was just in shock. And I honestly think like Kalel bailed us out in that sense
100%.
Because there's, it wasn't like, oh, we, scripted that perfectly. Like it wasn't a Rose Bowl, type drive where you're like, okay, you scripted it perfectly right there and drove down the field. But I was in shock that we were just huddling up, taking plenty of time. So I think there are some things there that need to be like addressed of like, hey guys, and this is where I think you look at Sherrone Moore and Kirk Campbell having inexperience, right?
Absolutely.
Of like game management and how to win a football game.
No, absolutely. I was losing my mind watching that last drive. I'm like, there's literally no way unless the thing that happens, which Kalel Mullings just Superman carrying dudes, but it was gritty. It was a great, it was a great game. Just, first half Michigan's dominant, right? I mean, what USC on their first 4 drive goes 3 and out every time. I think they had 11 yards through 12 plays on offense in the first few bit, and then they get that field goal, and then they have some momentum at the end of the half. They don't get anything out of it, but they get sacked at the end, but they move the ball and then they come out second half. Here's a question, Justin, because I think we can kind of pivot to the defense at this point. Unless there's anything you want to mention about the offense that we haven't covered.
No, I think that's perfect.
So defense, look, Will Johnson comes up with a huge pick 6, right? But that first drive coming out of the half, the lineups were really weird. Like you'd have Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and then like TJ Guy, and then another backup edge, and it's like they just came out of halftime. They just had a 20-minute break. Right? Like this is a huge drive, and you let them go down and score. I mean, Miller Moss. I mean, dude, that kid. I will say this. That kid, I thought he was done. Right? Like he's getting hit. He can't make throws, and he stood in there and he was gutsy as hell.
Talk about if Max Bredesen and Kalel Mullings are sore as hell on Sunday, Miller Moss is in the ice bath with them, right? Ooh. Like, oh my, I pray for that kid because he took some licks from Josiah Stewart, from we'll talk about Josiah in a second because that dude is an absolute animal. But yeah, I want to give Miller Moss his credit because, he stood in there, he got up time after time after time, made great plays. I think to your point though, of the lineups, honestly, is it weird? I spun it though as like what I thought was Rayshawn Benny, TJ Guy, Cam Brandt, a number of guys stepped up for Michigan, which I think they're going to need in the future. Where here's what I saw versus Texas. We tried to go with our top guys with Mason, KG, those guys pretty much all first half. They were gassed, right? We talked about that. So I wonder if Wink and whoever else is making the calls on what the rotations are. Esposito. Like, I wonder if they're like, hey, we need our second and third guys, those rotational guys in there so that we can have Mason and KG in the fourth quarter to end this game.
So my thing though would be you've already, because the Texas game, I get it because there's just, 10 play drive, right? Like they're just moving the ball and you can't get off the field on third downs. But my question would be like, how tired would these guys truly have been? Because again, they played 12 snaps in the first quarter and a half, and then they got the field goal, and then they had a little bit of a drive. They got to midfield. When you're up 14-3 coming out of half and they get the ball, it's like one stop and
Right.
you
I
potentially,
feel you.
go get a
I feel
touchdown
you.
on offense, right? Like it's a key moment. The other thing with the defense that we talked about pre-show is that there were some busts. Zeke Berry comes on a blitz from the slot, and there's no one over there. And I'm assuming
So
that's on Zeke because the guy's
it's
wide open.
well there I like as I was watching the game back, I kind of paused it and looked at like where the rest of the defense lined up, and like there literally isn't anybody on even that 3/4 of the field.
No,
Every other guy in the
they're all
secondary
on the left side of the
is
field.
all like from the hashes to the sideline of the other side of the field. And so like there was no Makari back there that's saving the day. So like he, he must have either gotten the wrong call or something. Yeah, but talk about like I think they said it on the broadcast. That is the definition of a busted coverage.
Yeah,
So there's that. I didn't think Makari had his best game. He
that should have
struggled.
been an interception. I don't know the angle he took. It looked like he could have got there on their go-ahead touchdown in the fourth quarter.
Either that
Um,
or like, I mean, blow him up, right?
right.
Like
Yeah, I think
anything.
it should have been a pick. I thought Miller Moss kind of let that ball hang a little bit, and he should have had the angle to undercut that and pick it, and then probably get out at least to like the 20 or 30, have some decent field position because there was
Yeah.
nobody down there. But and I was a little frustrated with Wink at times on Saturday, but I think overall, you put this on the bottom there. I mean, they definitely feel like a defense that is playing with some attitude. I mean, let's talk about Jair Hill. I thought he grew up. Like
He had his own fair share of mistakes as well, but like I definitely agree with you. Like we're watching him week after week be like, okay, I'm figuring out a couple more things each time as a really
yeah,
young defensive back.
yeah, and I mean, this is a guy who has been targeted a lot, right? Like this is a guy who's been kind of picked on. And so Lincoln Riley's obviously going to see that and try to go at him. And I thought he played really well. He had a few pass breakups. He had a really nice tackle. I hope that the tight end's not seriously hurt, but he did a great
Yeah.
job on that. I don't know if that was a screen, but he blew that up in the backfield. I mean, and that's the only thing he can do, right? Like just off topic, we see a lot of guys talk about, oh, this guy's dirty, that guy's dirty because they're a defensive back and they're trying to tackle a tight end, and it's like, this is what they say about Kirby Joseph, and it's like, well, I mean, he's got 30, 40 pounds on him. So Jair did a great job blowing that play up. I thought he played extremely well. The defensive line, we've kind of alluded to it. These guys were unreal. I'm excited to see the PFF grades. I'm excited to see what MGO Blog and Seth have to say about the defense because Jesus,
I mean,
brother, they were all over the place.
All over the place. Derek Moore on one side, Mason and KG in the middle. I honestly thought TJ Guy had a really good game as well. And then Josiah Stewart, I mean, he literally looked like Aiden Hutchinson.
Is he a first rounder?
I mean, he's playing his way up there. He's in the conversation.
Like he's at least a day 2 pick, right? At this point,
Yes.
because physically, I mean, dude, just think about this. His journey to Michigan is interesting because he's a kid from Massachusetts, right? So he knows Mikey Samers, so he knows all these guys from the New England area, and I think Michigan was heavily recruiting him, but then they fired Don Brown, right? This is a Don Brown guy, right? This is a guy that would have come to Michigan if Don Brown was here. This is another Quiddy Pay. Goes to Coastal Carolina, is a freshman All-American there. Sophomore year is okay. Comes here. Last year, really grew up. In the run game early on was not great. By the time we get to the playoffs, he's the guy that blows that play up against Alabama, puts J.C. Latham on his ass. Now as a senior, I mean, first round pick, dude.
I mean, he just like I watched Hutch yesterday, and I watched Josiah Stewart on Saturday, and I'm sitting here like he's like that stand-up guy with his ears pinned back, and he's lining up every time like I am about to crush the quarterback. Like I'm going full speed, gonna make one move and go. And I talk about praying for USC, but that left tackle, I think Seth Fisher tweeted out on Saturday, he is about to get tarmacked. Okay, they're just gonna leave him at the airport. Like
Well,
I
USC has a history of that,
they
Justin,
do
by
have
the
a
way.
history of that. And I just like that kid got cooked. He was on skates all day. And Josiah Stewart is like, I mean, again, it was literally just like one move into the inside and go. And Miller Moss, I think it was actually so Zach and I were in our seats talking about it at the game. That last drive, they even though they have to go, 80 yards in 40 seconds or whatever it was, they had to bring a tight end in to chip Josiah Stewart on every play. So they couldn't even get as many receivers out there to run what they wanted to because Josiah Stewart, even with the four-man rush, is just cooking the left tackle so much Miller Moss can't get a ball out. And I mean, I just don't know if I've seen somebody like him I mean, I guess I say it since like last year, right? But like somebody who just impacts the game so much as one person, where like if Miller Moss, has time the same way that Quinn Ewers did, like he's probably picking apart this defense, this secondary, but you have such an impact on what this quarterback is able to do. I mean, I don't have his stats right in front of me, but like it was ridiculous from what I saw with the number of pressures that he had. So I don't know if you just pulled it up.
No, I know his PFF grade was like a 95 or something absurd. I mean, the guy was just all over the field. 4 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, 4 quarterback hits, and he forced a fumble that our boy KG carried like a loaf of bread. So shout out to Kenneth
Dude,
Grant.
it is going back to that for a second. Honestly, like again, we're laughing about it now because we won the game,
I
but
was so mad. I
it
also
was
think that was a pass. Like even in the moment, I was like,
I agree.
yeah.
I said at least it needs to be reviewed. Like I don't. It
But if
was
KG had gone down, it would have been a fumble to me.
obviously,
So
obviously.
I will be transparent.
But I think the funniest thing to me was just like looking at a football in Kenneth Grant's hands, where it literally looks like he's carrying like I don't know, ping pong ball or something. Like it is shocking how small the ball looks because that man is just a giant, and him running is like one of the more comical things.
Man, yeah, I was like, go KG, and then he tried to stiff arm, and then the USC player made
That
a
was
heads up
unreal.
play. It's a
Yeah.
heads up play. But yeah, I thought Mason Graham. I mean, it feels like we don't really ever talk about Mason Graham because you're just like, oh, it's Mason Graham doing Mason Graham things. But he was
Right.
dominant. He was bullying that poor center. And Mason Graham, as we know, is from the Los Angeles area. I think USC was in his top 3, along with Michigan and Oregon before he picked Michigan. So not like a scenario where like, oh, they didn't recruit me, they didn't want me, but like
Yeah.
it's the home state school, and he balled out too, man. I thought all 4 defensive linemen were phenomenal. There were some. I will say I thought there were some issues with the linebackers, but I thought overall they were pretty solid. And let's just talk about the man, Will Johnson. I mean, you want to know? All right, so I'm at a wedding, and so
Fall
it's
weddings, love them.
yes, it's my cousin. Love her dearly. She's a Michigan fan. Her dad, my uncle, is a Michigan fan. He took me to my first game at the Big House, right? So it's a family thing. When she booked the venue, it was on a bye week, and then the Pac-12 schools came over, and they had to switch it up.
Got it.
But so I'm watching, and my best man at my wedding was at this wedding as well. And he's like, "Hey, have they targeted Will Johnson?" I was like, "Not really." And then the next play, they tried that little hitch, and Will Johnson takes that thing for 6, and it was amazing.
It was unbelievable. Honestly, it looked to me like he actually baited him into throwing that.
I think he
Like
did.
he's sitting there, and honestly, I was kind of like, I actually had a comment like a few players prior to that of like, Will's got to be better than that because he like was playing kind of soft off. He like let one of the crossing routes and kind of let him go, and I'm like, man, he's got to clamp down on that. And then he goes from flat footed to full speed, picking that off in like half a second. And I think he sat back because if you actually break down the play, so Miller Moss is reading Will, right? So they have a guy. So this, the inside guy does a little out, the outside guy does a little up and out, or out and up. I'm sorry. And so he's reading, is Will going to go back with the guy because then he's going to go under, or is Will going to come up? And then he actually, if Will did step up before he did, there's a little window that he hits the guy down the sideline before Makari can get there. And Will like baited, sat back a little bit, and then just beeline like I don't know. I'll never get tired of Will doing this where he just catches it on the run perfectly and it's, 6 before you blink, right?
Well,
Unbelievable.
I saw PFF put this out. He has since the start of last year, he has 3 pick sixes and no touchdowns allowed. He also is now the school record holder for pick sixes.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah,
And I feel like it's like
with 3 is kind of low, but
I agree
because Mikey had 2 last year, so
that's true.
maybe I don't know. I don't know who was the record holder alongside Mikey. I don't know if there's a bunch of guys with 2, but I think
But
Will's gonna get a couple more too.
Oh, for sure. I feel like, well, if people throw to him, like people are just gonna never throw to him, right? Like
That's not a bad thing.
I agree. I agree. But I feel like that stat of like 0 touchdowns allowed and that's like if there was war for the war stat in baseball, the
Yeah.
wins above replacement, like that if that he'd have the greatest war ever, where it's like
The
he's
nerds
literally-
would love him.
yes, yeah, sabermetrics.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean, again, I think I want to like end it here on the defense with just like they got their swagger back. I truly feel like they felt like, all right, this is a Lincoln Riley offense. They're planning to throw all over the place. This is how they win football games, right? Is by putting up big numbers. And Michigan, I thought for the first time all year, maybe not the first time all year, but I felt like it was like, all right, we're here and we are one of the top defenses in the nation, if not the number one defense in the nation. And like you can do whatever you want, but we're gonna figure it out. And just looking at Miller Moss's stats too, like when you throw the ball 51 times, like I just don't know how many times you're going to win football games. Like that's Shedeur Sanders ask. And like
And what, they were like 5.5 yards an attempt too, right? Like that's not great.
No, 28 for 51. If you throw the ball for 51 yards and don't get to 300 or 51 times and don't get to 300 yards, he was at 283 yards. Like
they were very inefficient,
Yeah.
And defensively, they had the one long run. And again, man, shout out to Jair Hill. If I don't want to keep coming back to this, if KG doesn't fumble that ball, we're talking about Jair Hill and that hustle to get him down before he scores, and then Josiah Stewart forces that fumble, right? Like, ultimately they end up scoring on that next drive, I guess. I don't know how you would call that.
Yeah.
But other than that run, which was caused by missed tackle, I thought the defense in the run game was phenomenal. And yeah, they gave up, quite a bit of yardage, but USC ran a lot of plays. I mean, they had to work for everything, and I'm encouraged by what I saw. So, I mean, what do you think moving forward? I know we'll have another pod this week to talk about Minnesota, but I feel good, right? Because you have Minnesota and then you have Washington. You get to the bye week, right? So you should be 5-1.
So okay, yes, you should be 5-1. Again, I feel like Michigan needed something like this to get their confidence back and be like, all right, we can win football games. This is, this is not a complete hangover from 2023 where, I said it before on the last pod with Nico on was like this past game against USC was going to determine the trajectory of Michigan season. If you win this game, you're going to go up and you feel like, all right, we can go, 10-2 at the very, 9-3 at the very least, whatever. If you lose that game and you're sitting at 2-2, I think the culture is going to struggle, right? You're going to struggle to have guys bought in for the entire year. Guys start looking at the NFL draft. Things start creeping into people's mind. Are we really that good? Or was it all Blake Corum and JJ McCarthy last year? Was it all that offensive line, all that stuff? So I do think this changes a lot of things. Now, with that being said, I was texting with Clayton Safety yesterday as well, and we were talking about like I was like, listen, I thought that this had some 2023 to it, where, like we said in the beginning of the show here, you figure out how to win football games, no matter what it takes. You just figure it out. And you go week to week, right? It's going to be this way this week. It's going to be a different way the next week. Now, what he said to me back, which I actually very much agree with, was the way that Michigan won last year was they'd win in a different way next week, right? JJ McCarthy would have gone out and thrown for 3 touchdowns or something, and you beat Minnesota in a different way. And that's what I don't know yet, if Michigan can do that. And it's going to be tough sledding. You know, obviously everyone's just going to stack the box if they know what's going to happen. And you even saw it yesterday, or it's on Saturday in the second half, where they're just playing cover zero. You said it, both safeties are within 10 yards. And it's like, okay, you're not just going to be able to ride Kalel Mullings every single game like that. He's going to die. Like
I don't know, man. I think he only had 17 carries too, right? So it wasn't like I mean, again, I would like him to get to 20.
17 carries on that last drive alone, honestly. So
yeah. I mean, dude, just looking at the schedule though, right? Like, again, you have Minnesota, you go to Washington, get a bye week. Illinois, sneaky good team right now, but also how good is Nebraska? How good's Kansas? How good are these teams that they've beaten, right? Because they beat a couple ranked teams so far that have fallen out of the rankings. But then you have Michigan State at home, and then Oregon comes to town, right? That's the big one up until the last game of the year, as we know. So like I'm sitting here looking like, IU looks pretty competent. They look decent, but it's like there's a world where Michigan's 10-1 going into the shoe, man. Like there's a world where that happens. I do this.
Ahead.
I do
you're
this.
Looking way ahead.
I do this, man. I love doing this.
I definitely I don't disagree. Like I think this win changes a lot of things for how you feel about this team. Of like, all right, all of a sudden, if you lose that game and then you're like, okay, we don't, have a QB that can throw the ball. We, all of a sudden, like, going to Washington looks tough, right? And I still think, although Washington is not obviously what they were last year, they beat Northwestern 24-5, which like, how do you like 5 Northwestern? Oh man, that program, I don't know what it, but
I put them as my sneaky trap game for the year, just because literally the only reason was because it was before Ohio State, but also they went to a bowl game last year. Scoring 5 points, that's diabolical.
It's unbelievable. But I think here's what I'll say. Yes, I agree with you. Is 10-1 going into the shoe a possibility? 100%. They still have some shit to figure out.
100%. Right? Like, I'm projecting that as like they find some answers on offense.
I think that you need to realize, like, I actually still have some questions in the fact of like, is Alex Orji still your best option? I don't know. Obviously we're Davis Warren guys, and I still stand by the fact that I thought outside of 2 really, poor decisions against Arkansas State, he played really well. But like, is there a world where they still are both playing? Because I just don't think you're going to go 10-1 going into the shoe if you can't throw the ball downfield at all, right? Like, you can't run an armed forces offense, a military school offense, and go like win in the Big Ten. Maybe you can, but like, I have a really hard time understanding that. And so you're gonna have to, whether you at least try it with Alex Orji, I don't know, but like, the teams are gonna keep figuring this out more and more, right, as the year goes on. And so I don't know. I think you got to at least see what happens there, and you have to have an option to throw the ball down the field. But, I do think Minnesota is an inferior opponent, if I'm, being blunt, right? I think Washington, to be honest, is very much in rebuild mode. So I think you have, and then you have a bye, right? And so I think you have a few weeks here to try stuff out and see what happens. And if I'm answering the question below of where does Michigan go from here, I think against Minnesota, like they need to come out throwing the ball a lot to see like, and I don't care if it doesn't work right away. You have to get the reps. I do not want to see them just go run with Alex Orji in and run like the spread option or read option. Like you have to see if he has what it takes in order to win football games from here on out.
Well, I want to see. I mean, I know they tried the flea flicker. Nobody was open. I want to see one flea flicker a game. Honestly, at this point, I want to see majority of pass attempts or pass plays be play action. I would love to see, in addition to the read option, to have Samaj or Tyler Morris or somebody as a pitch man. I mean, I know that's a complex install because it's not just like, oh, you just pitch it, right? It's not like the college football video game. Like there's timing and rhythm with that. But I think adding another option to be a triple option team, talking about the service academies, I think would just create a lot of conflicts for those defenses that Michigan's going to face. You like you said, you've got to be creative, right? Like, yes, you got to be able to throw the ball. I mean, Michigan doesn't need to throw the ball for 300 yards, right? If you get to like 150 and be complimentary,
like awesome. Yeah.
200 for this Michigan team is like 500 for anybody else in the country.
Right.
So I just want to see, to your point, like run play action. Like as good as Michigan's been running the ball, they don't run a lot of play action, which is just mind blowing to me.
Okay, you want to know? That's a great call because there was a play yesterday. I was watching the Lions that I absolutely loved, where it was Jared Goff. They do run a lot of play action, right? The NFL, there's no doubt, and I love Ben Johnson's offense. Goff needs to be better. That's for sure too. But there was one play specifically that I was like, damn, this would be awesome if Michigan ran it. And you have to run a lot of play action in order for it to work. But he actually did. It's just a stretch play, but he hands it off and keeps running like it's play action and goes out. And I'm like, if you did that with Orji, you'd have half the defense, I think, running with Orji, right? And like, I agree with you. I think that they could spread it out, and at least that, at least that gives Alex Orji the option to move. I'm betting on Alex Orji in the event that there's a linebacker that comes up to try and get him. I'm taking Orji in that he's going to juke him out or figure out in space how to get by him. And then it gives him time to see the field. Because I don't think on Saturday he really even saw the field downfield at all. Right. And so I think you need to be creative in all that. I'd love to see, them throwing some wrinkles and like, even if it's like a 7-step drop or whatever, like get him back there and give him some time to survey the field and see what's down there.
100%. You got to slow the game down for him, make it easy. Give him throws that are close to him, right? Like, so Colson Loveland potentially coming back. I mean, I think he can rest the next couple of weeks, in my opinion. I feel like Michigan should be able to out-talent both of the upcoming opponents.
But I want to see. I agree with you. Obviously, if there's like any question, I think you sit him.
Yeah. If there's,
but I also want to see like we need to give Alex Orji some tools to go.
Absolutely. But I thought I was impressed with Marlon Klein. I thought he was a great blocker.
No.
I think at this point, I'm good with him being an inline tight end and then just use Colson Level like Devin Funchess at this point.
100%.
I mean, obviously, you can bring him in line every so often, but like, if you're going to trot out some of the receivers you trot out, again, I'm put Dono in the slot, have Colson line up out wide, and, use Kalel, obviously, but then Ben Hall as your running backs, and then Bredesen as the H-back. And I'm like, okay, we can work with this, right? Give me Tyler Morse or Samaj out there, and I'm good. Like you gotta lean on the guys on your offense that make this thing go, and that's those guys, right? Also, just real quick, because we talked offense, defense, special teams. I thought Samaj was really good in the punt return game, man. I thought he had the one that kind of bounced to him, I think.
And then he had one. He fumbled like the first one, but picked it up and went crazy with it.
That's always fine with me if it's enough time, right? Like, because Jabril did that, and I think he almost housed one. Maybe it was Penn State way back in the day.
It like weirdly usually works out for the guys.
It does, yeah. But I thought Samaj, I think he's grown a lot in that area. I think, if you could get him the ball, I think he can be a downfield receiver.
Yeah.
So I think I don't want to see Samaj come off the field, basically, is what I'm saying. Because I think he gives you your best chances as a downfield threat. I
I
think him,
agree.
Freddie Moore, Tyler Morris are the only guys. I mean, CJ Charleston and Peyton bring a lot in the blocking game, so I guess I'm okay with that. But I want those guys getting the majority of the snaps because those are guys that, hey, if we run mesh, we run a drag, or we run a slant, can catch the ball and go and make something happen, right? And you make it less
Yeah.
difficult on Orgy to get yardage because you have yards after the catch versus him trying to throw it 50 yards downfield.
I think as well, like the other thing about Colston being out, like I saw Max Bredesen running like drag routes multiple times as well. And he's like trying to weave his way through linebackers. And I love Max Bredesen, but I'll say this to his face. Hey, you're not our best option at running a drag route, right? Like we need you to be
I'd rather see him
blocking.
in the flat. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're going to
right.
involve him in the pass game, get him out in the flat, right? Because
Yeah.
you can't. Again, we talked about it. I don't have the PFF grades up in front of me and the snap counts. You can't, have him on the field 35 plays and you're running the ball 30 times. You just can't.
Right.
You're going to be able to key off on that so easily.
Right. It's very true. It's very true. So you got to figure that out. But I think that like in that situation, it's probably I don't know, Marlin instead of Max if Holston Loveland's on the field. Right. So Hogan Hansen, I think, is playing well as well. Here's what I'm gonna say to end it here. We will not apologize for winning.
Absolutely.
We will absolutely not apologize. I will take the victory no matter what. You find a way. That was the mantra of 2023, right? Like that is not the most pretty, national championship of all time, right? Like even in the Rose Bowl, you make mistake after mistake that you actually haven't made all year, and you figure out how to win a football game. And so I felt like that was big, not only for this team and the players, but for Sharon Moore to be like, all right, we're going to figure out a way to win. He needed that himself too, right? I think there was, probably a little doubt in his own mind of like, damn, can I do this without Coach Harbaugh? Like all that. And so he needs some of that too. I loved his fire that he had on Saturday. And I think that, this team just needs to keep making improvements. I think that what you saw in weeks 1 through 3 were a team that's trying to figure out who they were, right?
Mhm.
And struggling a little bit at times, but you're going to see this team continue to grow and grow and grow. What we had in 2023 that we didn't have this year was you had 6, 7, 8 games of just like plenty of time to figure it out. And that's with a senior led team, right? With guys that you knew were really good. This team has been thrown into the fire twice in what, 5 weeks, right? And so I think that I'm not, or sorry, twice in 4 weeks. And so like you're just going to keep seeing them get better and better, in my opinion. And you're going to see guys grow. You're going to see this offensive line grow. You're going to see Jair Hill and Zeke Berry grow. You're going to see Alex Orji and Davis Warren or whoever, it is grow. And I think the other thing too is Davis Warren's got to be ready to go. If you're going to run Alex Orji like you did, like there is a chance that he's going to get banged up at some point, and you need to have him or Tuttle or whoever it is come back in and win you a football game at some point down the road. And so I'm very excited about how I'm seeing this team progress, even just, a third of the way through the season. And so I'm excited for what's to come. I think you said it spot on of like, you go into Minnesota, Minnesota comes to town, but you play Minnesota, they're an inferior opponent. You should go crush them, build on it, keep moving. Then you go to Seattle, you go to Washington and say, all right, let's go win a road game for the first time this year. And then all of a sudden you're going into the bye week at 5-1. And it's like, okay, all of a sudden this season is like, let's fucking go. We can, we have a chance to go win the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm telling you that that schedule, I mean, teams got to go out and do their thing, and they got to continue to get better and improve and work on some of the things that are kind of plaguing them at the moment. I'm telling you, that schedule sets up to where they could be 7-1, go up against 7-1 or 8-0 Oregon in the Big House. That big noon kickoff. It's going to be a little colder. It's going to be hostile.
I'll take the Big House any day, because the one thing we didn't talk about was how awesome the Big House was.
That's what everyone said, man. I wish I was there.
Insane, bro. It was so sick.
I had friends texting me because, again, I'm watching it on my phone at the wedding, so I can't really hear it, or I don't really have the sound on, but like I've got friends who are not Michigan fans who are like, dude, you can't even hear the announcers. Like it was
I couldn't hear the
phenomenal
video
environment.
board. Honest to God, I could not hear the speakers coming from the video board. Like it was so loud. You know, it's hard to tell because you're in it, but like people said, like that was the loudest, like louder than some of the Ohio State games, right? Like it's like it you know, this place. I tweeted it yesterday, but like it's different now since that 2021 Ohio State game. That changed everything for us here at the Big House, and I honestly like this is one of the harder places to play. It's no wine and cheese crowd anymore. It's no like everyone sit down and let's go out for a walk in the park. Like when and now you have big teams coming to the Big House, every other week, right? And so like I love it. And to your point, when Michigan State comes to town, that's going to be a big one. I bet you that's a night game. When Oregon comes to town, that could be a night game. Like who knows? One of those two, I believe, is going to be a night game, or it's big noon kick, like whatever it is. I think it is. Oregon's going to struggle, and I mean they're super talented team, but I just from a standpoint of having to come here and Dylan Gabriel is going to have to go up against Will Johnson in this defense. Like you're going to have a wake up call, and so I just love the way Again, I love the trajectory of this team, of this program, of our fan base. We're back. We were never gone, but we're back.
I'm just not a fan of the gal I mentioned in the early part of the podcast. If anyone is still remembers what I said about 50 minutes ago. What are we back from? Winning the national championship?
We're back from winning the national championship.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
We took a one-game hiatus to the number one team in the nation, and we did not play well. So,
hey, what are you gonna do, man? Like, hey. I'm with you, man. I feel good. I'm excited to be back. Live podcast Friday at the Pretzel Belt. The weather's cooling down again.
It's football weather. It was 85 on Saturday. It was hot.
Bro, we had an outdoor ceremony, and I always wear a suit to a wedding. I just feel like that's the right, the appropriate thing to do. Dying. You died.
Just like dripping sweat on the inside.
But the pro move is like my homies were like, why are you wearing a suit coat? I'm like, because no one can see me sweat, dude.
Exactly.
If I just had the shirt on, like, yeah, it might be whiter, but you're just gonna see me just sweating through my shirt.
You're like Sean Miller, the Arizona basketball coach.
Just keep the jacket on, brother.
Just keep the jacket on, dude.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad, I will say.
Also, the tailgate was electric, absolutely electric.
330 kicks.
330 kicks are the best, dude. It's so good. Shout out to North Beak. I had a Hail IPA in the stadium. Come on, it does not get better than that. And then we had plenty of Truly and Sun Cruiser at the tailgate as well. So shout out to them. It was great. It was great vibes all day.
Hey, we got a noon kick on Saturday, big noon kickoff, which is a little disappointing to me. But I got 2 weeks of tailgating to catch up on in like 5 hours.
I love it.
So we got to get after. We're gonna take a shot ski, beer bong, the bongzilla, whatever. Again, my wife may kill me because
that's okay.
I'm, there's nothing better than getting to the tailgate the week after like a big win. You're just like fired up still.
Hey, listen, if your wife is mad at you, you just read what's on the screen right now and just say, I'm sorry, honey. I'm not going to apologize for winning. I'm sorry.
I will not apologize for the success of Michigan football.
And
cannot be held responsible. Absolutely.
All right. For us, you can follow us at Blue by 90 on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Blue by 90 Podcast on YouTube, and blueby90.com. We appreciate you. Go Blue.
Go Blue.